Hello, and welcome to the second Computer Science Education Week celebratory Lunch and Learn brought to you by the Indiana Department of Education, the Learning Lab, and Keep Indiana Learning, a collaboration called the In Learning Partnership. I'm Amanda McCammon, the STEM Synergy Coordinator for Keep Indiana Learning, and I will be your host today. I'm a lifelong Indiana educator who has served students and families for over 15 years as a technology education teacher, a CTE director, a student services director, and an assistant superintendent in rural, suburban, and urban school districts across the state of Indiana. I also served the Indiana educators for 2 years at the state office of the Department of Education as the Chief of Workforce and STEM Alliances. Most recently, I have been supporting educators across the nation in various ways, and right here in Indiana through STEM Synergy with Keep Indiana Learning. STEM Synergy is the STEM leg of Keep Indiana Learning. It's a STEM centric community of practice committed to fostering the delivery of data informed services, including high quality professional development, resources, and organizations in an endeavor to produce a combined impact greater than the sum of separate STEM efforts. STEM Synergy is also the result of numerous partnerships over the years and is the latest iteration of the Indiana STEM ecosystem. In today's Lunch and Learn, we're going to talk about the growth projection of computer science compared to other jobs and what that looks like, and why everyone should be integrating computer science components into their instruction, regardless of the content area or grade level that they serve. So hopefully today you'll come away with from this short session with some information that you can use to develop a sense of curiosity and excitement for you and your students around the future of around computer science career opportunities for both you and your students. So let's jump in and looking at the labor force. So this chart here that you can see, and I know the numbers are a little bit difficult to see, so I'm going to try to talk through some of this, but you should also have access to this later to kind of zoom in. So the labor force is expected to increase by 8.9 million or 5.5% from 2020 to 2030. So roughly just a little under 10 years. The total employment is projected to increase by 11.9 million jobs from 2020 to 2030. And this data is coming from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics if you want to check that out. This increase reflects an annual growth rate of 0.7%, which is higher than recent projection cycles and accounts for the recovery from that low base year employment from 2020 due to COVID, the pandemic, and then recession from COVID. Employment in leisure and hospitality sectors is actually projected to increase the fastest, which makes relatively good sense with people coming out of COVID and the recession and wanting to travel and do some more things with their families. Once COVID has somewhat surpassed. This is largely driven by that recovery growth, while the healthcare and social assistance sector is projected and also adding the most new jobs. Again, makes a lot of good common sense based off of what we've been going through. 8.9 million is what this shows here on this graph as an increase in the workforce, but the projected increase of 11.9 million jobs. So you have 8.9 million increase in workforce, but with an additional lapse there of about a deficit of about 3 million workers. So 8.9 million increase in workforce, but 11.9 million increase in terms of job. So there's actually a deficit there that we need to work towards filling through educating our students. And this is one reason why it's so vital to ensure that we're prepping them for the skills that they need to be problem solvers and critical thinkers for these jobs of tomorrow, because the jobs are definitely going to be there. So, what are these jobs that are going to be available to our students when they enter the workforce? It's ultimately really hard to say, right? There's many jobs that we don't even know that will be there. We don't know jobs that are going to exist when our students enter the workforce. A prime example, I know at least for myself, 10 years ago, serving students in the field, I would have never been thinking to prepare them for potentially making 6+ figures being an influencer, right? On social media platforms like TikTok. That was never something I would have thought of that would have even existed or had been a lucrative career that they could have been preparing themselves for. But here we are. Although these newly created unknown jobs that will be out there 10 years plus for our students are somewhat hard for us to predict, there are data sets that we can take a look at that will indicate what career clusters or career pathways and specific occupations and jobs are projected to grow and or decline in the future. So what you can see here, and I know the font's a little bit small, what you can see here is in this image is the projected percent of employment changes by occupational group. And there is even some additional, even finer print there that I'll talk about here in just a minute. So, what that fine print that you can't read says is that the blue that you're seeing there in those occupational labels there for the jobs that are listed, the blue part on that chart is recovery from the COVID-19 recession. So those would be considered what's considered a reversal decline in employment, and that's from 2019 to 2020 during the COVID-19 initial push, and then the recession that was ultimately a result of that. You can see on this chart, or you could see, if you could see the numbers, you could see the growth of the computer science occupational group here. And I have it highlighted there and kind of pointed out with the red line. If you can see where that falls, and generally speaking, see the yellow line versus the blue. So you can see here the growth of that computer science occupational group. But the fine print that I mentioned, I want to take note of that because according to this projection, again by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, computer science jobs have not been impacted by COVID-19 and the recession that came from COVID-19. So they, unlike a lot of these other areas that you see here in this chart, are not having to go through a rebound and then grow. So they're not having to make up for that negative, that deficit from COVID and the recession. So, for example, management, if you could see it here on this chart, management has about a 9% recovery from the recession, COVID related recession, but no rebound expected in that growth. So important to note, but important to also note that lack of rebound for management. So they have that 9% recovery from the recession. They're going to have to gain that back before they can grow, but there's no rebound expected in that growth. Healthcare support obviously would make sense. It did have a decline, so it had a 2.5% decline with the recession, and then the effects of COVID and people leaving that occupation because of the risk factor. I would manage. I would bet. But you are going to see in this data chart here, you can see within healthcare support a significant growth of almost 25%. So even though they had that 2.5% decline because of the recession, they additionally have the significant growth because of obviously the things that have been going on in our world of about 25%. So one thing I want to note here is specifically called out that computer science piece, but then additionally, I want you to be thinking about as we look at these data sets, computer science related occupations, not only that are called out specifically, like in this one line item, but where they aren't called out, right? So computer science skills are needed in all of these jobs. Computer science isn't just what a lot of people think of when they think about the terminology of computer science. And you can see there on your screen kind of a little image of all the different components that technically fall within computer science. If you were to look at it as, for example, a course description or different variables that play a factor into the content, for example, within a standalone computer science course, let's say. But you can see here that all of those topics within that image would actually be embedded into that are embedded in computer science, including like artificial intelligence, coding, which is a common one we think of with computer science, especially this week with CSED week and Hour of Code, algorithms, databases, but you also have things like social impact and a variety of other things that fall within kind of the confines of computer science. So I want you to be thinking about those and keeping them in mind, the skills that students need, the skills that they will gain from that computer science instruction in any of these computer science related areas. They learn to be curious. They learn to solve problems, which is a skill set everyone needs. They learn to try again and fail and then try again, right? They learn computational thinking skills across content areas when this is embedded everywhere by all teachers in all content areas, and so many things more than that. So somewhere within all of these listed occupations that you see here in this particular analysis, as well as other data sets that we're going to look at, computer science is sometimes called out specifically, but if it's not called out specifically, then it is embedded. It's embedded within those other occupational titles in some capacity. So, one of our jobs as educators is to ensure, along with many, many others, right, is to ensure that we are preparing our students for those careers of tomorrow that we know about or that we don't know exist yet. Not only what's available or what will be available, but something that they'll find fulfilling, that they'll enjoy doing. We also want to consider the median annual salary for those positions and what's projected to grow in terms of that kind of side of things. We want our students to not only be going after a career that the jobs are going to be there, it's going to be fulfilling for them, but it's also going to be lucrative for them to sustain the lifestyle that they desire to have. So we must take that into consideration, not only where those jobs are projected to be in terms of occupational type, but also the level of income that will come along with those jobs. It's very important to consider that piece. And most importantly, we then consider how, as educators, can we start to embed components of prepping our students to be ready for those careers in our classrooms and our schools, even if it's not a specific standalone computer science. But how can we embed the components of that to prepare them for the jobs of tomorrow so that they can have those jobs that they need and want and that are readily available to them? This next chart shows the top 10 fastest growing occupations. And the something to note here, again, this is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. But something to note here is that this chart does not include occupations that declined during the pandemic. We'll actually take a look at that here in a slide or two. But what I want to talk about is just what you're seeing here. So let me actually make my screen a little bit bigger so I can speak directly to this because I know that it's a little bit difficult to see. Okay, so what you're taking a look at here is on the left-hand side, you can see those top 10 fastest growing occupations by title, right? Wind turbine, service tech, nurse practitioner, solar installers, etc. Then in the next column, you can see that percent change that's projected over that 10-year span from 2020 to 2030. That's in the blue. The middle row is your employment change that's projected for that 10-year, and that's in thousands, and that's in the green kind of column there in the middle. And then lastly, on the right, you can see the median annual wages that were calculated in May of 2020. So I'm going to speak just a little bit about what we're looking at here and point out just a few things that I think are really valuable to take note on as in regard to this particular chart. So you can see in this next slide here where I've called out the specifics around computer science. So within these top 10 fastest growing occupations, and this is national data, again, excluding any occupations that are experiencing that pandemic recovery. So those are taken off this chart, right? These are the ones that were not impacted. So looking at these top 10 fastest growing occupations, there's really just two areas that I have shown there with a red arrow that are really kind of specific to computer science in the traditional sense, right? You have the information security analysts, and then you also have the data scientists and mathematical science occupations. So, of those two, you can see that the information security analyst has a 33.3% change that's projected. So, that 33.3% increase in the projected occupations. And then you can see there the employment change in the green over the next 10 years in thousands. You can see how significant that is when you look at it in comparison to some of the other ones as well. So, for example, for information security analysts, you have 47.1 is the green column for that employment change. Again, that's in thousands. So 47.1 thousand projected employment change, so employment growth. The occupations that are available, that percent changes, again, 33.3, but then the employment change growth in thousands is going to increase the number of employed in that field by 47.1 thousand. The other thing I want to point out here is the wage. So you can see there, for example, again, with information security analysts, honing in on those two kind of computer science focused occupations, The median annual wage, again, this is for 2020, was 103,000, a little over 103,000. If we move down to the line item for data scientists and mathematical scientists, you can see there the percent change is projected an increase of just over 31%, and then additional growth there in the employment change in thousands, just under 20,000 increase, with a median annual salary in 2020 of a little over 98,000. So that's really where in the idea of the 10 the 10 top fastest growing occupations, nationally speaking, excluding those affected by pandemic recovery, those are really the two areas that computer science specifically is seeing growth. But again, like I spoke about before, computer science is everywhere within that. Computer science skills that we already spoke about is necessary within all of those fields. Even though I'm highlighting those two computer science pieces, critical thinking, problem solving, and the ability to inquire, be curious, and solve those problems. Those are key components that are embedded within computer science, in all components of computer science, that should then be pushed out and embedded within all content areas, all grade levels across the K 12 space in all ways possible, because we all need them. All these jobs need them. So even though I called out those two specific to computer science, again, this is just reiterating that those top 10 fastest growing occupations nationally over the next 10 years, computer science skills are everywhere. This next slide here, again, is still that same chart, excluding the pandemic growth. And what I want to talk about here is just the data that it's showing specifically, again, around science and math occupations, the security analysts being those two computer science related, and the growth in that green space. It's important to think about those components of computer science and embedding those computational skills, problem solving, critical thinking, etc., because these occupations are in those top 10 for growth. And then it's also important to note, as you take a look at this slide, the occupation with the largest employment change in the green area there in the middle column is home health and personal care aides. Huge growth in employment there. It's a decent positive percent change, but that I want you to take a look and take note of that median annual wage. So this is what I want you to take a look at when you look at these occupations and how they're growing. Of course, the annual wage is a larger conversation, right? It's a larger issue with how we're really providing the appropriate wage for the where the need is, right? That's a whole nother conversation at a national level and at a state and local level as well. But important to note that just because there is growth does not translate to a comfortable living wage, and this is one prime example. So again, just to point out what I'm reiterating here is the highest growth in these 10 fastest growing occupations, per this chart here. You can see in the employment change, there will be a lot of employment, a lot of people being hired within that home health and personal care aid for obvious reasons, right? We are coming out of a pandemic, but is it a livable wage at $27,000 as a median annual salary? That's tough. That's a tough salary to have, to be a livable wage. Not really, in my opinion, a livable wage at all. So something important to note, because we can't just talk about where the jobs are with our students. We also have to talk about what's going to provide them with a livable wage in terms of what's going to be offered. So something else important to note as you take a look at these data sets. So this next chart is the other side of it. So we took a look in the last slide, on the excluded pandemic recovery top fastest growing occupations, right? This is a chart showing the 10 fastest growing occupations projected for those same 10 years. But this is a different set of data points. The difference is that between this chart and the last one is that these are the occupations that were impacted negatively by the pandemic. So they declined during the pandemic. Computer science, you'll see, is not called out specifically within this chart. because it wasn't per the data of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it was not computer science was not impacted negatively. They did not see a decline during or as a result of the pandemic. So that's why you don't see that specifically on here. But I think this is another important data set to kind of talk about. So largest growth rate of those negatively impacted by the pandemic was cooks. So you'll see. So what does this mean? So during the pandemic, it was negatively impacted. Now, where are we? So you'll see that it is significantly growing. Why? Well, that makes sense. Everybody's ready to go back out and eat again. There for a period of time during COVID, restaurants were shut down, et cetera. So this all makes sense. Then you have fitness trainers. So everyone got out to eat. Now they gain weight. They've decided to take another route with their health. And so now they need fitness trainers. So as you take a look at these 10 fastest growing occupations that were impacted by the pandemic, it all really makes sense. You've got nurse practitioners, which makes sense because the pandemic and health issues that come from getting COVID, going through rehab, and then new health issues that come out of that. So all of these things are making sense. Travel, you'll see on here as well. Again, makes sense because now people are back to being able to travel, so more hotel staff is needed. So just trying to make the point here that even though this is not focused on computer science here, it's important data to note because it all makes sense. And in sharing this with your students, to do some analytics around where the jobs are going to be and why that makes sense because of the things that we've experienced with the pandemic, it really does align well. And one other piece on this I think is interesting is people looking at ways to save on their electric bills and make better decisions for our planet. Solar panel installers, wind turbine techs, things like that. So again, although this doesn't look relevant to computer science, it is as components learned through computer science are still embedded in these positions and in these jobs. So I want to reiterate that as well, the value of teaching them the why, your students, the why behind this data as well as the previous data, and how it's really preparing them for these real world jobs as you involve that content from computer science. For a second, I just want to touch a little bit on income again. I know I've mentioned it, but I just want to point out here this is actually a screenshot from um, the a video. I'm not going to take the time to show it, but there is a video that is linked in the resources at the end of these slides that I take a look at. And it's just a short video that identifies kind of all the data points we've talked about and flips through. It's from the Bureau of Labor Statistics on occupational employment and gives you kind of those highlights for those projections. So I'd take a look at that, or it's a great way to share that with your students as well regarding those fastest growing occupations. But what I want to point out here is this. So this particular line item here with the occupations with the highest projection in terms of job growth, as well as the median annual wage. Take a note there on all these different areas of job growth. So you have home health care, personal aides, cooks, fast food, the things we talked about, right? Waiters, waitresses, lots of growth, lots of new jobs available, lots of growth potential. A reminder around the median annual wage. So you can see a significant difference there between where those CS jobs are. There's going to be growth, and there's also going to be a wage that's going to correlate with that, that our students are going to really interested in being able to access in the future. So speaking of money again, just to hit on, generally speaking, STEM pays higher, right? So computer science is STEM. In general, STEM workers enjoy higher median earnings than those that are in non-STEM occupations. And this chart here shows you kind of a breakdown of that. So this was data from 2019 demonstrating the comparable mean salary for workers in all jobs versus non-STEM jobs or STEM jobs. So you can kind of see the difference there to share with your students as well. Another resource that I want to hit on regarding that you could use with your students would be a great activity to do with them in really diving into research and analytics around this data with workforce development. Is again, this link is shown in the resources document that you'll have access to, but it's just another cool way to look at jobs and salary projections. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics has created kind of their own periodic table of STEM occupations. Again, showing the data points that we've already talked about in that projection. These actually happen to be 2019 to 2029, but it also shows the degree that they need to get in order to have a role in that particular occupation, the median wage, etc. Great way for your students to take a look at this. All right, so now let's jump into Indiana. So how do we know what's happening in Indiana specific? We've been talking national data. There's a great tool that Indiana offers, and it's called Indiana Career Ready. That's one of many, and within that site, they have lots of different things that you can take a look at. But Indiana Career Ready focuses on those high demand, high wage jobs for today and tomorrow within the state of Indiana. It will help to ensure kind of that long and rewarding, lucrative career as we prepare our students. So, really something that you should dive into and take a look at. They use what's called a demand indicator, and it's based on a methodology that ranks all of the Indiana jobs based off of that future growth and future wage. Whether you're searching for students looking for their first job, or you're changing jobs, or you're re-entering the workforce, all of this data is really relevant and really can be used as the cornerstone for walking into and making those changes or jumping into the job market. So as you take a look at that, the Indiana Flame ranking is what they use, and that ranking is calculated for each occupation using both short-term job data, projection data, and long-term projected job data. It's a mouthful. Indiana occupations are then ranked from 1 to 10 in categories to produce both a short term and a long term ranking. And then once the Outlook scores are calculated, the scores are then averaged to develop like this flame ranking. So you'll see there, if you can see that on your screen, the column that says in demand ranking, it looks like little flames. Those are their flame rankings. And those look at total openings, growth openings, the growth of openings in the occupation, the percent change from the base year to the projected year. It uses real-time labor market data, so job posting data around online job boards and things that are collected. And then also they take a look at those wages. And then as those new projections and wage data is received, those flames are recalculated. That happens quarterly. And if the data is not available, then for Indiana specifically, then they use that national data. If time allows, I was going to jump in, but we are running close to about 3 minutes, 2.5 minutes. So I want to go ahead and move forward a little bit here so that, and I can come back to this if we have time. But there is a link that you can go to in the resources to take a look a little bit deeper into these jobs. Again, just to reiterate, if we don't have time to go into these Indiana specific jobs, take a look at this website. These hot jobs for Indiana, they're computer science, again, just like you're seeing at the national level. Those components of computer science are embedded everywhere. So even if it's not called out specifically, although you can see on this snapshot on the slide here at the very bottom, computer systems is called out as one of the top, and it has a 5 flame ranking for Indiana, one of the top jobs, sitting at an average salary of just over 82,000. So even just in that quick snapshot there, you can see that it is a high demand job in Indiana as well. Something else that I was hoping that we would have time to jump into today and do a little tour that I think is valuable, considering that it's Computer Science Education Week. And one thing we always try to do as educators is give our students that real world opportunity to see what it looks like, right? You can't be it if you can't see it. So we try to provide our students an opportunity to actually see what this looks like in the real world. There's an opportunity through Amazon Future Engineer to do a tour of an Amazon facility. I was hoping to be able to have time to jump into that live tour today, but if not, you can sign up as a teacher and allow your students to experience that, to see where computer science is embedded within something like an Amazon facility. So definitely take a look at that link, and you can also access lots of teacher toolkits and other resources within that resource. So definitely take a look there. And we have about 30 seconds left. So I am going to not have time to show you let me go back here, the Indiana Flame ranking and site, but definitely take a look at that. The jobs are absolutely there, not only nationally, but statewide, just for Hoosiers of what is currently available and then also what is projected. So definitely take a look at that once you have an opportunity. Additionally, I have the resource links here with all the things that I covered today in terms of data points as well as resources. That Indiana Career Ready link there is number 6, is the one that we didn't have time to dive into today, but definitely take a look at that because it's going to be ultimately the most valuable to you in looking at the jobs of Indiana within computer science. So our time's up. So thank you so much. I know that's a ton of information, but remember, computer science jobs are hot and they're getting hotter. They pay really well. So regardless of the grade level that you're teaching or subject matter, computer science components and discussion of jobs of tomorrow and today is ultimately super valuable to your students. So make sure that you're embedding that for your students. Computer science is for all students, but it's also for all teachers and content areas and classrooms. So thank you so much for joining us today for this CS Ed Week Lunch and Learn about the CS workforce. Please join us again each day this week for more great computer science related content and resources brought to you by the InLearning Partnership, a collaboration between the Department of Education, the Learning Lab, and Keep Indiana Learning. Have a great day.